Hi guys. So for this week's discussion, I decided to go over the second option, which goes over watching a pot of water boil and you recording all you see. And I thought it was kind of interesting, just perceiving how my different senses, recorded everything, and yeah. And so what I did to measure this experiment or this observation, I just in the notes, it said that it usually takes 5 minutes or longer. For me, it was around 7.5 minutes before my pot of water started boiling. I don't know if it's just because of a crappy oven, or I don't know. My apartment's kind of interesting, but anyway, so what I did is, so I divided the minutes into sections, like on a left-hand column, so I wrote down like 1, and then like 1.5 minutes, then 2 minutes, and 2.5 minutes, and 3 minutes, and then on the top section, I wrote see, hear, smell, feel, and taste, and then divided it and made it a chart. And so I recorded everything that I saw just based off the time, and yeah, it was kind of interesting. So I'll just go over my results with you guys here real quick. So at the first minute, there wasn't really anything to see. It was just like a plain pot of water. You couldn't really perceive anything. Same with hearing, couldn't really hear anything. With smelling though, I could kind of smell the heat from the oven. Kind of feel it in my nose and a little bit like in my skin. Not too much. I think that was mainly just the heat from the oven, and not really anything produced from the pot quite yet. And as far as taste could go, I couldn't really taste anything. Around 1.5 minutes, I started to see little bits of swirly lines at the bottom of the pan. So they weren't quite, little bubbles yet, but I could see little swirly lines, and I couldn't quite hear anything yet. Get the oven heat still kind of the same at that point. And then I could feel the heat from the air kind of progressing as well. And then taste, I could kind of feel the heat in my tongue when I opened my mouth. Not really. By the time I got to 2 minutes, the lines got fast. The swirly lines were moving at a faster rate. And then I could kind of hear the water begin to sizzle at this point. Not really. But then, as far as smelling and feeling and tasting goes, I could just feel the heat in the room just kind of progress a little bit stronger at that point. By 2.5 minutes, I started to see vapor arise from the pot of water, and began to, just see it sizzle, and then I can kind of hear it sizzling a little bit more, but nothing too much. And then as far as smell, feeling, and tasting goes, it just got progressively a little stronger. By 3 minutes, the vapor was a lot stronger, but what I thought was interesting is that the sizzling kind of stopped. I didn't really hear anything, and I thought that was interesting. I thought it just progressively, the sizzling would get louder, but no, it just kind of stopped, and it ended up continuing a little bit later. But yeah, it was kind of interesting. And then, feelings, smelling and tasting all just got stronger, but the smelling, I could smell a little bit more gas. I feel a little bit more heat. But yeah, and then at 3.5 minutes, everything just got stronger, but I couldn't really hear anything as well. And then at 4 minutes, everything just kind of stayed the same, and there wasn't really anything to record there. At 4.5 minutes, everything except for the feeling and tasting the heat, those got a little bit stronger as well. But really, when we got to 5 minutes, that's when it started to really pick up and progress. So I could start to see small little bubbles at the bottom of the pan really begin to form, but not too much, but it almost looked like a shadow, like little shadowy little bubbles at the bottom of the pan that began to collectively come together. And then everything else stayed the same. And then by 5.5 minutes, they all got bigger, little bubbles, and then all my other senses that I could perceive, all just stayed the same there as well. By 6 minutes, the bubbles had gotten a lot bigger, and then, as far as like hearing, smelling, feeling, and tasting, they all got just a little bit stronger. But it wasn't until 6.5 minutes when the bubbles began to rise to the top. They went from the bottom to the top just slowly, and then there's more smoke, or more vapor began to produce at that point as well, but not as much as before. And then I could start to hear a slight sizzle from the pan as well. And then all the other senses began to get stronger as well. But it really wasn't until 7.5 minutes where there's lots of bubbles forming at the bottom of the pan, and yeah, I could hear a lot of sizzle, and the heat was fairly strong compared to at the start of this observation. And yeah, by 7.5 minutes, had a full boil, and there's lots of bubbles popping, and I could hear it very well. And yeah, so I just thought that was interesting, just being able to take it minute by minute and sense by sense, and just being able to record and just kind of, be aware of my senses and see how they were impacted by the pot of water getting progressively hotter. And yeah, I just thought this was a really interesting observation to do.